Well, what is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Was considering going live for this, but I figured I'd just wait till Thursday. I told you guys in the last live stream I was going to do Thursday due to the fact that the schedule is released on Thursday. I think the official time is 8 p.m., but it will probably fully leak before that. Whenever I get the full schedule is when I will go live and talk to you guys about the schedule, and I'm sure this will be a large topic of conversation as well, being that James Bradberry was a vital piece of this defense. And we all know that Wink needs good corner play in his defense to be as aggressive as he wants to be. Well, right now, that certainly looks like the Achilles heel of this defense for the New York Giants going into the 2022 season. I'll give my full opinion on all of it as we go throughout this video, but looking forward to the live on Thursday. Hopefully I get to see some of you guys there. Always appreciate all the support you guys always show on the channel. But let's jump into the decision to cut James Bradberry. Of course, Dave Gettleman signed Bradberry 3 years ago or 2 years ago. This would have been his third year with the New York Giants. And last year, not just with Bradberry, but other players, the New York Giants decided to backload their contracts in order to give themselves the ability to sign Adoree Jackson, to sign Kenny Golladay. And yes, the pandemic played a factor. And yes, did I make sense of it due to the fact that Daniel Jones was entering the third year of his rookie salary and you were trying to maximize his potential? Sure, but the Giants took a big swing and they had a big miss. And Schoen was the man who has to clean up this mess. And a lot of Giants fans, rightfully so, are going to be disappointed with this. Listen, after the draft, I came out and I said during draft night, wow, I really hope we keep James Bradberry, because if we do, our defense could be pretty special. Not to say it would be elite, but you wouldn't have any, gaping holes in the defense. Now, I think you certainly do, and we'll talk about some of the guys that will be competing to potentially be that outside cornerback spot opposite Adoree Jackson, who suddenly has now become the New York Giants' #1 cornerback. And, of course, the Giants further committed themselves to Adoree Jackson earlier this season, offseason, when they backloaded his salary. So expect Jackson to be here for at least 2 years, and you have to figure in future drafts, the Giants are going to have to spend high draft capital at this position, but it'll be really interesting to see how Wink maneuvers with this defense. We all know Wink likes to blitz 50% of the time while he was with the Baltimore Ravens. I don't know if you're necessarily going to be able to do that when you have the corner play that we do, and of course we're going to be very thin, so if a guy like Adoree Jackson goes down, that could be a lot of problems in this secondary. But I think as Giants fans, or at least me as a Giants fan, my opinion going into this offseason was I'm expecting growth. I'm expecting, a step in the right direction, but at the same time, I realize we're not going to be able to fill every hole. When you factor in the cap situation that we were in, the fact that we weren't going to be able to attack free agency the way in which some fans may like, and the fact that Schoen is going to get rid of a lot of the players from within this roster due to the fact that he was never responsible for them being here to begin with, similar to what Dave Gettleman did in 2019. So I'm not surprised by this move. As a matter of fact, I talked about it for months, as did every other Giants content creator, that this was expected, and in the end, it's what happened. Would I have liked the New York Giants to be able to trade James Bradberry? Absolutely, for a few reasons. One, the obvious one being that you get draft compensation, or at least something, for a guy that is still an above-average cornerback in the NFL. Two, you prevent him from going to some of your potential rivals. Obviously, the Eagles, Cowboys, and Washington may knock on his door. And the fact that this dragged out as long as it did, is it possible Bradberry may have some resentment towards the Giants and say to himself, yeah, I wouldn't mind going to an opposing rival? I'm sure he may have some motivation. Of course, in the end, Bradberry's going to probably go to the highest bidder, but you have to figure his market is not going to be particularly high, due to the fact that a lot of teams were not looking to trade for him in the first place, and they were only going to have to eat about, I think it was about 10 of the $21 million, due to the fact that the Giants were committed to about 11. But let's jump into the specifics. This is coming out from Dan Duggan, and the main reason why the New York Giants made this move, simple. Cap space, and Schoen is looking to build this team. He is thinking towards 2024, 2025, 2026. Of course, he wants this team to compete year one, and I think his primary focus is trying to assist Daniel Jones in the offensive side of the football as best as he can, obviously with the Evan Neal, all the offensive lineman signings that the New York Giants made, the drafting of a second-round wide receiver, with Wendell Robinson, because they really need to find out what they have with their quarterback, and if Jones is not the guy, they need a pretty good situation for the rookie that will inevitably replace him. So I think his main objective this offseason was the offensive side of the football, and it'll probably continue to be that. Obviously, we had a Kayvon Thibodeau, but now you have a gaping hole at the cornerback spot. There's no doubt about it. This coming out from Dan Duggan. The Giants are releasing cornerback James Bradberry after failing to find a trade partner per source. The move will create $10.1 million of cap space savings while leaving $11.7 in dead money. Savings will be 11.5 with 10.4 dead money this year and 1.4 dead money in 2023 if they make it a post June 1st cut. And we'll have to wait and see if they decide to do this after June 1st for salary cap purposes. If they do, I would assume at that point James Bradberry already has a team in mind that he's willing to sign with. I'm sure that he's had discussions with teams along the way, and the writing was on the wall. During voluntary minicamp, you saw everybody show up outside of Kadarius Toney at first and James Bradberry. And James Bradberry never gave off the vibe as the type of guy that would miss something like that. My guess would be the New York Giants told him to stay home. Listen, we don't want to risk you getting any kind of injury. We're still trying to trade you before the draft or potentially on draft night. Stay at home, and we're going to try to get this resolved as quickly as we can. And I know a lot of Giants fans are going to come down on Joe Schoen for this. And yeah, in an ideal world, Schoen, I would have loved had he been able to get a 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, hell, even a 7th round pick. But my guess would be there was never a market for him. Otherwise, James Bradberry would not be a New York Giant. It's why Joe Schoen held out as long as he possibly could. At least that's my guess. We'll never know the real reason, but I see no reason why Schoen wouldn't trade him if he knew he was going to cut him all along. The problem is a lot of teams out there saw that Joe Schoen was stuck between a rock and a hard place. They saw the New York Giants cap situation. They saw a GM that was not looking to backload salaries due to the fact that he's trying to build this team from scratch, and they knew that they could wait it out, and eventually the New York Giants would have no choice but to move on from James Bradberry. Make no mistake about it, there will be an interest for him throughout the league. Bradberry, of course, also didn't necessarily fit this scheme particularly well. Several people talked about that. He's more of a zone guy as opposed to press, and that may have something to do with it as well. Wink may not view James Bradberry as his ideal corner, and if you don't view Bradberry as a piece of this team beyond this year, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Think about it right now if you're a New York Giants fan watching this. Do you expect the New York Giants to win a Super Bowl this year? Do you even expect the New York Giants to win the division this year? And they could. I'm not saying they will or won't. But if you don't think we're true contenders this year, why would you damage the future for a guy that won't be here beyond this year? And that was more than likely always going to be the case. Bradberry, 29 years old, doesn't necessarily fit the scheme particularly well. Not a guy that Joe Schoen brought in here to begin with. So I always thought Bradberry was not going to be a Giant. We were all hoping that he was going to be traded. And I suppose you could knock Schoen for that. But if there wasn't a market, there wasn't a market. And I applaud Joe Schoen throughout this entire offseason for not looking for instant gratification to appeal to the fan base. We're all starving for wins. Listen, I want the Giants to win the Super Bowl every year, but I also realize that this is a rebuild. A lot of Giants fans don't want to accept that, but that's the truth of the matter. Of course, they're going to try to compete from within the rebuild, but this is year one of Joe Schoen. He's going to get rid of the garbage, he's going to clean up the crappy cap situation, and he's going to start to build this team the way he sees fit. And the silver lining out of all of this is the New York Giants are now much stronger at the two most important positions, or at least arguably the two most important positions outside of the quarterback spot. That, of course, being the edge, and that, of course, being the offensive tackle. And if you're beginning a rebuild, if you don't have a quarterback you're absolutely in love with in the draft, that is how you begin it. And that is exactly what Joe Schoen has done. His two missions are clearly obvious since he took this job. Clean up the offensive line as quickly as possible. Clean up the cap situation as quickly as possible. And while the New York Giants don't have a squeaky clean cap situation next year, you'll hear people, predict that they're going to have $100 million to spend. That will not be the case. Don't expect that next year. I also don't think they're going to go out on a spending spree. It will be much more cleaned up, and it will give Joe Schoen the opportunity to extend some players on this roster like Andrew Thomas after this year if he remains healthy, and to do things like that along with bring in a couple of pieces. Say you need to sign a veteran cornerback next year because you may be drafting a quarterback in the first round and you need that immediate impact on the outside. In terms of what the New York Giants are going to do this year to replace James Bradberry, listen, don't expect great cornerback play. I do think that will be the weakness of this secondary. Some Giants fans seem to think some of these guys could get the job done, and I certainly hope they can, and they're going to get the opportunity. I think that's the mindset right now with this team. Will they bring in a veteran? It's possible, but I would assume it would be for depth purposes. Maybe it would start at the beginning if they didn't feel like guys like Aaron Robinson were ready to go, but I think the Giants are looking to analyze the young players on this roster at that position and go forward from there. After this year, if they feel like they need an upgrade, they'll go out and do it. There have been rumors that the Giants were trying out Aaron Robinson on the outside. Of course, the Giants initially drafted him in 2020 or 2021, whatever it was, to be the slot cornerback, which is what he played at college, but he does have some of the measurables to potentially play on the outside. Darnay Holmes, I suppose, is another option. People have brought him up, but the Giants drafted him to be a slot corner, did play on the outside well at UCLA. And of course, you have Julian Love, who I think is more slotted to be the safety, but does have experience on the outside, along with our third-round pick this year with Flott. So there are options, and I do think they'll at least bring in some competition. May not be tomorrow. It may be towards the end of camp when teams try to get down to their final 53. Maybe there'll be a value guy that they think could fill that void for this football team. But there will be a weakness there, and the Giants now are one Adoree Jackson injury away from being in big trouble in that secondary. Both the cornerback 1 and cornerback 2, you could certainly argue, had a downgrade with this move due to the fact that you're now asking Jackson to be what Bradberry was last year, even though I think they were probably at least comparable. I actually think Jackson may have been slightly better, and you're asking now somebody to replace Adoree Jackson on the other side who doesn't have a whole lot of experience in the NFL playing as an exterior cornerback. So we'll see what the New York Giants ultimately end up doing. But don't get too bent out of shape. I tried to prepare myself as a fan during the offseason. I said to myself, there's going to be holes on this team after the fact. There's no way you're going to be able to fill every hole. And I do think the Giants' plan from the beginning was to draft Sauce Gardner. I do believe that in my heart. He wasn't there. He was off the board. He went in the top 4, and at that point, they had no option but to take the best edge rusher. And in the end, that could prove to be an incredible pick with Kayvon Thibodeaux. And obviously, a lot of Giants fans are thrilled with it. But with that comes now the need for a cornerback, probably in future drafts, or hopefully one of these younger players develop into a diamond in the rough. The other thing, if you want to take a positive approach, is you could say to yourself, well, with an improved pass rush, it should improve the cornerback play due to the fact that they won't have to cover quite as long. Both of them kind of go hand in hand, and we'll see what this Giants pass rush looks like in 2022. In an ideal world, I would have loved James Bradberry back. Do I think that there were things they could have done to limit the backloading? Sure, I think they would have at least had to backload $6, $7, $8 million at some point, whether that be extending a guy like Leo, whether it be extending Bradberry, whether it be adding void years, but you could have cut Slayton, you could have cut Nick Gates. There were options that the New York Giants had. In the end, Joe Schoen decided this was the best course of action for the future of this football team. Will it cost us some games this year? Perhaps, but I think it makes us a better team, at least potentially, in 2023 and beyond. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.